All right. Well, hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is a collaboration between SMB Suite and Critical Insight. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity predictions. But before we start, Samantha, do you want to say hi from SMB Suite?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Uh, we are here to have some takeaways from our last webinar session. SMB Suite helps as a Microsoft Cloud technology partner, and we've had a lot of questions lead into further predictions of 2024 cybersecurity. And Jake, Brad, we're so happy to have you here joining us.
Yeah, we're happy to be here. And, this comes up every year. You see the predictions that come up every year. If we have time at the end and folks want to know what were your predictions for 2023 that were wrong, happy to tell you the answer to that question. So who are we? Who's Critical Insight? We, besides just partnering with SMB Suite, which is wonderful, we help defend organizations against cyber attack. And we do that by helping them prepare for a cyber attack, detect one quickly with our security operations centers, and then respond decisively. Samantha said hi already. Brad, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Brad Swanson. I'm part of the Critical Insight family. I work as a vCISO here. I also do a lot of audit prep work for organizations, security awareness training, or if somebody just needs a bucket of hours that they want someone to help consult with. I'm available for all that kind of stuff. Been doing security for about 28 years. I'm happy to be here today. Jake?
Awesome. And my name's Jake Melstein. I run marketing for Critical Insight and run our events, and I tell really bad jokes and dad jokes and all sorts of things. And so I'll be providing the color to today's webinar. Okay, there's two things that everybody should know before we start. Number one, yes, you will get a recording of this, and if you want the slides, just let us know. And number two, there's a chat on the right. If you go to the right, you see a chat. You can let us know where you're joining from. And you can ask questions, because my favorite thing to do is to interrupt Brad while he's talking. So ask any questions that come up. Happy to answer them. Okay. So last time we spoke to the SMB Suite audience, one of the things we talked about was the risk equation. And I think it bears repeating before we get to the predictions. And this is how you should look at cybersecurity and look at your cybersecurity posture. Risk represents the organizational consequences of a breach. You can never bring risk to zero. That's not a thing. Why? Well, it equals likelihood, which represents the probability that an attacker will compromise an organization using an existing vulnerability. So, whether that's an email vulnerability or a software vulnerability or whatever, you can't bring likelihood to zero. So because you can't bring likelihood to zero, what you want to do is also work to bring down the impact of an attack. So and I tell this story frequently, there was a hospital in the Pacific Northwest that got hit by ransomware criminals, but because they had done all the right things, the bad guys only got their marketing PowerPoints. Now, this would hurt Samantha and me, but it doesn't destroy the organization and doesn't impact customers deeply. And so impact lower, didn't stop hospital operations. Everything kept going. Marketing team was annoyed. That is the kind of impact you want, unless you run marketing and then you don't want to be annoyed. Okay, as we get to the predictions, quick disclaimer. We're basing this on what we see, the indicators. We're not perfect. That's what this says. All right, Brad. By the way, when we get into this, we're going to talk about individual actors, state actors, what we think is going to happen, and Brad's going to go through it. Brad, go for it.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Jake. So let's start out with individual actors. And again, these are predictions, but this is all based on indicators that we've been seeing, the path that we see things taking. So we think there's going to be a ramp up of attacks against the victims, right? So if there's a breach and a bunch of hospital records get stolen, rather than just going to the hospital and demanding a ransom for this data back, now the bad actors are also going after the victims, and they're telling the hospital, we'll threaten the victims' kids. We'll threaten the victims. We have their name and their address. We'll start sending mail to them, threatening them. We'll do whatever. And this is going all the way up to include things like swatting. For those that aren't familiar with swatting, that's where the bad actors will call like the local sheriff's office or local law enforcement and say, there's a person with a gun inside this residence. Here's the address. Please come quick and hang up. People have been killed because of these swatting attacks. If nothing else, it's extremely off-putting and just nerve-wracking to go through this. And they've started to threaten to do this. There were some recent threats in Seattle, yeah, Jake?
Yeah, I was going to say, Fred Hutch Cancer Care Center, this happened, and they started to email the patients. Now, even if you're not a hospital where this has happened a lot, it has also happened at a school district in Texas where the bad guys started emailing parents and saying, hey, tell the school district to pay the ransom. You should expect this to come up. So in your preparedness for a ransomware attack, everybody needs to be prepared for your end customers, for your individual employees to be contacted by the bad guys.
And it's very important that they don't give additional information to the bad guys, that they don't really interact with them. Let whoever you're working with deal with that, law enforcement, legal groups, things like that. The other thing that we're predicting is that ransomware is going to continue to be a threat. It's not going to go away anytime soon for the simple fact that it works. If you look at the recent happenings in Las Vegas, Caesars paid out $15 million for a very small amount of work, really, on the side of the bad actors. It works. They're going to keep doing it. And now they're offering ransomware as a service. So you don't have to be good at ransomware. You can be, a complete neophyte to hacking. You just download one of these ransomwares as a service. You kick some money back to the people who give you the tools, and you go out and make some money. We're seeing a lot of glamorization of hacking. TV shows, some movies, they glamorize this hacker lifestyle. A lot of younger folks are watching this and saying, boy, it'd be really cool to be a hacker, wouldn't it? I'd get respect from my friends. I'd be popular. I'd be cool. I'd make money. All these hackers are driving Ferraris. I want a Ferrari. So that's how they get them kind of hooked. And these entry-level hackers, they start out becoming hacktivists. They're going to see something that they don't care for. It could be climate change, and they want to go hack BP's website. They're gonna start attacking places like that. Now that we're getting closer to the elections, we're already seeing a ramp up in all kinds of false information coming out. There was a thing that Mike Hamilton here at CI was talking about, where if you have a belief around things like the election, right, you can find a news article or a YouTube video that's going to back up your position. And it creates that bias in us that, oh, well, we're right because I found a news article. Never mind the fact that the news article came from Billy Bob's Bait Shack and News. And we're also going to see people, as we come up with all these conflicts around the world, there's so many conflicts right now. We've got the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We have Israel and Hamas. We have, Taiwan just voted that they want to be independent from China. So that's going to cause some issues. We're going to start to see a lot of these individuals that say, hey, I don't like what Russia's doing. We're going to go hack them. We're going to throw whatever we can at them to try and disrupt them to help Ukraine. Or, I'm on Team Israel. We're going to do things against Palestine, take some of their servers offline if we can. Other people are saying, hey, we're on the side of Palestine. We don't like the things that Israel's been doing, and so vice versa. So we're going to see a lot of this from individual actors.
And let me add some color here, because, a lot of folks say, well, that's really far off seas. It's not going to impact us. So let me just tell two quick stories here. One of the things that has already happened is Iranian threat actors have said, we're going to go after Israeli companies, not Israeli government, but companies that are based in Israel. So they went after a software vendor. That software vendor, an Israeli software vendor, that Israeli software vendor happens to provide the control systems for water districts in the U.S. And I believe there were a few in Pennsylvania that were all breached. through this Israeli software because they were caught up in what happened in the Middle East. And I'm sure when they bought their software, they didn't think, oh, I'm buying it from an Israeli company, therefore I'm in jeopardy of an attack from Iran, right? That's number one. Number two, the hacktivists. So I think we have seen that we are in a time where companies take positions on political and social issues. And in a damned if you do, damned if you don't, sometimes when companies don't take a position on a social issue, people get mad at them for not taking a stance on a social issue. I think we can all think about some of those cases. As we see this younger generation say, hey, it's easier or I want to be a hacker, I want to break into things. That second line there, it's really easy to go buy ransomware online. It's $500. And I can go attack this company that did or didn't take a position that I'm mad at. And so we're going to see a rise in that. And last year we saw a big rise in hacktivism when the Supreme Court made its decision about abortion. We saw a big rise in hacktivism there on both sides. We saw this. We're seeing it now around, as Brad said, the Israel-Palestinian issues, and you can think of even local issues where you are. That somebody would say, "Hey, I'm mad about this," and that's something we're going to see. And so both, as Brad said, you're facing these threats. You didn't even know you were being threatened by Iran because you had a piece of Israeli software, and your organization did or did not take a position on a major issue and therefore is in danger. I was talking to an organization in Alaska where there's a very political fight up there about something called the Willow Mine. And an organization did not take a stand on it, and therefore people got mad at them and somebody took down their website just because they didn't take a stand on it. So this comes up. All right. That's individual actors. Now, state actors. Brad.
Yeah, sure. So state actors obviously are going to be a little bit different than our individuals. They're much more well-funded. They do larger campaigns typically. We're going to start seeing that. We're going to see a lot more financial fraud out of like China. We've already seen some of this. Between them stealing things through apps on your phone. If you just download a random product or a random app on your phone, it could have backdoors in it. We are seeing a lot more of that. We are seeing a lot of financial fraud going to China in the form of these games for your phone where, you can win $3,000 a day. Spend $100 to buy coins. You can win that $3,000. You never get paid. It's just a moneymaker for them. We're also seeing a lot of interference in some of the cryptocurrency exchanges as well. So we think that we're going to see an increase in this financial fraud, primarily from China, but also from other actors.
And as we look at that, the other thing there is business email compromise. And if folks don't know what business email compromise is, it's somebody takes over an O365 account and then is able to send out invoices. In one story, there was a vendor. That vendor got compromised. They started sending invoices. One was for $250,000 to a city. The city got the invoice, and at the top it said, "Oh, the routing number has changed, and you're behind payment, and you'd better send this money right now, or we're going to cut off this service that the city uses." And so there was a phone number, associated with the company, and so they called the phone number. Well, guess what? The bad guys that had broken into the email had also been able to reroute the VoIP phone system, so they answered the phone and said, "Yes, that's real." And so, you got to, that is something that, an actor like China can do. So you got to be really careful.
And it's really hard to spot some of these. I worked for a company in a previous life before I joined the CI family. They fell for that. They made their lease payments in downtown San Francisco to a bad actor. They got an email from the right account saying, "Oh, our banking information's changed, and we're out hundreds of thousands of dollars." And it took a long time going back and forth with the banks to get that back. I don't know about y'all. I can't be without an extra $100,000 for several months as the banks fight it over. So it's something to be very aware of and keep an eye out for. We also think that we're going to see the energy infrastructure be compromised. We've already seen several attacks on water systems. We've seen some attacks on energy systems. We think that's going to start to ramp up, especially with the things that are taking place like around Iran right now. The Houthis and everything else going on. We think these attacks are going to ramp up over the course of 2024. So it's very important for us to be on our toes on that. Obviously, we have the election coming up. We're going to see, and we're already seeing some other nation states that are trying to interfere or sway people's opinions, make people think things. I was reading something yesterday about Putin supposedly said, "Oh yeah, there's X number of votes that weren't valid in the last election." And all he's doing is getting people riled up on both sides. You have the people that say, no, the election wasn't valid, and people say, yes, it was. It doesn't matter to Putin. He just wants to create that chaos, get us fighting against ourselves. And it's working. It works very well. And all he had to do is make a statement. He didn't have to hack anything. He just got in front of a microphone and said some things.
And I think important to note on the elections, one, just besides the general disruption, this is not something where, we're going to see, election, like mass election systems, like taken over by Russia. That's not how this goes, right? They can do much less work and create the discord that Brad is talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And you hear about how election machines are not secure. Yeah, they could be better, but a lot of these groups are saying, "Oh, we've got this election machine and we hacked it." They're getting old election machines. They're getting election machines like the firmware's outdated, things like that. Could the machines be better? Yeah, but I think we're going to see a lot more in the terms of more psyops type attacks than we are attacks directly against election machines. It's hard to control an election machine. It's very easy to control a human. So that's kind of what we're going to be seeing a lot of. We're going to start to see sanctions against states that support criminal actors. We've already seen some of this, with different conflicts around the world. We're going to expand that, we think, to states that sanction hacking: China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, places like that. We're also going to start to, with that, we're also going to start to tighten up our logical borders. We don't have anything to stop people coming in over the digital world, right? We have, customs and border patrol stations for physical entry into the country, but for digital entry, there's really nothing. I think we're going to tighten down on that.
And I was to say to that end, let's talk about some of the ransomware attacks from the last year. If a terrorist walked into a business, a hospital, a city, and held them ransom, it would be a terrorist attack. But somehow, when it's cyber, it's not. And we're starting to see the FBI take more notice of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good. It's we need it. It's time. And then we're also going to see more conflict. We're already seeing the conflict start to ramp up. As I mentioned earlier, like Taiwan just voted that they want independence from China. That's going to cause more issues in that area, ongoing issues in that area. We think that something is going to come to be between India and Pakistan. We think they're going to start really ramping up cyber attacks against each other. We don't think they're going to move to kinetic attacks per se, but the cyber is definitely going to increase there. Jake, thoughts on that one?
I think the first thing you said is exactly right. So where it doesn't really matter where the conflict happens overseas, it's the impact on us. So what should you do as an organization? Well, the software you buy, the people you have, the where is it based? Could somebody want to infiltrate that? Like, we are not saying don't buy Israeli software or don't buy software from, what we are saying, don't buy software from Russia. But we aren't saying, those kind of things. But we are saying that is a risk and you need to know your risks.
And even if you don't buy that software, you still need to keep your eyes peeled, because there's this theory of blast radius, right? So if India and Pakistan come to cyber blows, they're not going to be real careful. If one of their attacks misses but accidentally infects a visiting U.S. national, that they don't care. It doesn't matter. That's just the cost of doing business in a cyber war, right? And so we will see people that get affected by this that had nothing to do with it, just because their cousin's uncle's brother works for a company in India and he likes to share memes or dad jokes, and he forwards you an email, you open it, and now you just got hit by that same blast radius. So just be cautious. Use good critical thinking when you see stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait for one of my dad jokes to cause some international incident, but we'll keep going.
Right. All right, so technology, we're going to see some technology changes. So AI is at the forefront of every news article you see these days, it seems. We see that AI, as it evolves and becomes better, it could replace and augment staff. So like your first tier analyst in a SOC, for example, AI could replace those individuals and allow them to maybe focus on tier 2 or tier 3 issues. We can make our headcount go a lot further through the use of AI. We think that's going to happen. AI is also going to evolve for the bad actors too, though, right? So if they use generative AI, they can scam businesses through email compromise. We're already seeing that. We're seeing where phishing emails used to be easy to spot, right? All kinds of misspellings, the wrong logos, they were terrible, broken English. Now they're perfect because AI will write a perfect phishing email every time. And there are guardrails around, having it make you a bomb or, write a phishing email. There's ways to bypass those guardrails. You can give it very specific instructions and it will write you a phishing email all day long. With the AI, we see that like some of the criminal corporations, they're going to kind of get into more of the, as a service model and affiliates, right? Why should they risk themselves when they can have some of these new hacktivists that watched a TV show and said, that's cool, I want to be somebody. They can use them as affiliates and have them kind of do the legwork for them. We're going to start to see better malware using AI. And detection using AI will start to actually work well or work better than it has in the past. AI is going to do a lot of stuff, both good and bad. It's like a hammer, right? I can use a hammer to hammer a nail. I can use a hammer to hit Jake on the head and take his wallet. It's all about how you use the tool of AI. And we're going to say it used in both ways. And then finally, we're going to start seeing attacks on satellites. My personal opinion, just take all this with a grain of salt. My personal opinion is we've already seen that. We had a client who is in the space business, and the government needed a satellite put up very quickly. Just all of a sudden, hey, we need a satellite in the air in 24 hours. And this organization did it. They got the bird up in the air and all was well. They couldn't talk about what that satellite did. And then all of a sudden, Starlink satellites are falling out of the sky. Part of me wonders if that isn't targeted attacks on some of these devices. Might be, might not be. I don't have proof to that, so I don't want to be official on that.
Yep. And, it's funny, as Brad said, you can't ask ChatGPT for a phishing email, but, you can ask for, post because I have too many characters in this. But I asked ChatGPT to write an email asking my boss for Nintendo gift cards, right? We've all seen those emails. There you go. That's what ChatGPT wrote in under 5 seconds. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. We've already seen an uptick in two things from bad guys using AI for text. Number one is, as Brad said, fewer misspellings, more cohesive emails, harder to spot. That's number one. But number two, there's also a larger volume. It is now easier for the bad guys to send a ton of emails using generative AI. And so you should expect the volume to go up, and the ease of spoofing an email address has become easier. You can now tell a bot to do it. And it's relatively easy to do. And, for all of the good things about AI, and there are a lot of good things about generative AI, this is the other side of it. And, I just saw a demo of something where they can take my voice, they can take 10 seconds of me talking and all of a sudden spoof a voicemail that sounds just like me. 10 seconds. And so, one of the things to think about is if you have a CEO, a CFO, a board member, whatever, who has videos out with their voice on it, interviews, they're on YouTube, they do webinars like this, that is something to watch out for.
We're also seeing too with the AI where they can do deep fake videos now as well. Using the AI they feed it some samples of videos of you doing webinars, Jake, and then they can copy your voice and then also deep fake the videos to have you say, Brad really needs a Ferrari. And next thing you know, CI's getting me a Ferrari, and it's all because of the AI.
I will tell the accounting department to stop that Ferrari right now.
So finally, we have some predictions around regulatory changes because they are coming. We are seeing a lot of regulatory changes already, and we think that's going to continue. We do think there might be a revolt against new regulations from some sector-specific agencies. And the reason is a lot of these agencies don't talk to each other before they come up with regulatory requirements. And so, when you do some of these things in a silo, it can be a little bumpy. I'm sure a lot of us remember Sarbanes-Oxley when it first came out, and you could tell that it was written by politicians and not, security professionals. And so they went through a couple of iterations and got some feedback, and everybody let them know, hey, this needs to change. That other thing is fine. And so it's going to get better. But initially, we are going to see revolt against some of these regulations, and we're already seeing revolts against regulations on a political basis. That's already taking place. We had some really good regulatory stuff coming down the pipe. Some local governments, some state governments said, well, we're not going to do that. The whole thing kind of fell apart. Everybody has to do it or nobody has to do it type of thing. We're going to see a lot more state level regulations as well. New York is coming out with a bunch of state level regulations around cybersecurity. We think other states are going to follow suit, especially states that have been hit. It wouldn't surprise me, being in Nevada, if Nevada came up with some after the big MGM and Caesars hacks that affected, hundreds of thousands of people. We think this regulatory focus is going to shift from preparedness to resilience. It's not, hey, prepare so that you don't get hacked. It's what happens when you do get hacked. How do you bounce back from that? How do you keep running your business? How do you take care of your clients? And then finally, we think that a national privacy statute will come out. The UK has GDPR. There's a bunch of others throughout the world. We think that the US is going to come up with some sort of a privacy statute, just because there's been so many breaches and so many people's privacy has been affected by that. Jake, your thoughts?
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think that the U.S. will get it together to do a national privacy statute, and I think what we're going to end up with is this patchwork of state privacy, and I think that's going to make it really hard for businesses, because if you have employees in a certain state or if you're doing business in a certain state, I think that's going to be really difficult. And going back to the question of the regulations at the top. So what do you do about this? Well, I think there's something really useful that's happened in the last year, which is the federal government has told all critical infrastructure, we want you to align with the NIST cybersecurity framework. And even if you are not in a business that is critical infrastructure, I think you can take this as a cue of, hey, this is something the US is going to try to do together. And so can I align my assessments? Can I align my business to the NIST cybersecurity framework? And I think that one of the things that we've been able to help some of our customers do is start to align themselves there. And we use a platform called Cybersecurity that we give to our customers so that they can see how that alignment with NIST CSF works. And that's something we're rolling out over the course of this year. So, I mean, I think that is something, if you don't have a GRC, governance risk compliance platform like Cybersecurity, it's time to take a look at that and something we can help with.
And I think you're right about the patchwork. You're talking about the national privacy statute. I think you're right. It is going to be a patchwork, and it's going to be gross. I think that's going to be the driver for the U.S. as a whole to say, okay, we're coming up with a national privacy statute, because otherwise, like you're saying, it's going to be impossible to do business. The way I do business in Arkansas is going to be different than how I do it in Alaska. It's going to be different than how I do it in Wisconsin. So, yeah, I think it is going to be ugly for a good portion of the time. Hopefully, that's what drives us to get a national statute. But we'll have to see. Again, these are predictions. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I think one of the things that's leading it is right now, I don't know about your companies, but most companies say, hey, I can hire people in these states, but not these other states if I'm going to have remote workers. And I think we're going to see that. And that's really annoying, right? It's because there's no federal there's no, there's an allowance for the states to do employment law. And create, in different ways. Well, I think I don't think that I think we're going to see the same thing for privacy. I don't think there's the appetite in Congress to make that the thing we tackle, but we shall see. And so how do we help folks do that? Do all of this with, hand in hand with SMB Suite. So we help folks prepare for a cyber attack, detect one quickly, and respond decisively. After I go through this, by the way, I'm going to want questions. So if people have questions about any of the predictions, now's a good time to put it in the chat. So the number one thing, if you have not done it, is to work on your incident preparedness on the left. And what that means is to build an incident response plan and update it. And what do I mean by update it? Well, remember that first thing we talked about where the ransomware bad guys are now calling customers and consumers? If you don't have a plan for, hey, if the ransomware bad guys call our employees or our customers, what are we going to do about that? How are we going to prepare for that? That needs to be in your incident response plan and your tabletop exercises, which we help run. Those risk assessments and gap analyses. So those risk assessments, again, we just talked about NIST CSF. It's good to try to use a risk assessment to align yourself to NIST CSF. Vulnerability identification, penetration testing. One note for folks, a lot of folks by regulation have to do a pen test every year. I will give you a tip. You will pay more, and your pen test might be a little more rushed if you do it in Q4, because that's when everybody wants to get theirs done. So book it now and say, hey, I'm going to do this in Q3. Let me just get it on the calendar now. And by the way, that's not us. That's true for everybody, especially because financial institutions generally all do it in Q4. Regulatory compliance and audit prep. One of the things that Brad said before is that he performs work as a vCISO. That stands for virtual CISO, sometimes called a fractional CISO. And he helps folks prepare for audits and do regulatory compliance with them. Brad, can you just explain briefly what a vCISO does?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, it's like having a full-blown CISO, but at a fraction of the price. Hence the term fractional CISO. You're not paying with a vCISO. You're not paying for me 24/7, 365. You're not paying that golden parachute. I'm basically there when you need a CISO. If you need somebody to go in front of the board, if you need somebody to help you with your 3-year security roadmap, if you're going through a user audit, all these different things we can assist with. Maybe you want to get ISO certified, or you want to get your SOC 2 Type 2, or Maybe you work with the government. You need to do a CMMC audit. We can help with that kind of stuff. We can do tabletops depending on the CISO package that you get. A whole lot of things. Basically, it's like having that CISO without the high cost.
Mm-hmm. Now, detection in the middle. So MDR is managed detection response, and we're now using an open XDR platform to monitor on-prem, cloud, SaaS, third-party apps, IoT, OT, endpoint. So what does that mean? Well, that means that if you don't have a cybersecurity team that works 24/7, 365, we watch your network for you and can take action on the network when something comes up. And continuous vulnerability identification, we're using Tenable, if you know the company, and looking for vulnerabilities. Looking for vulnerabilities on your network, as frequently as necessary. And then response on the right. So Rapid Quarantine is the Security Operations Center taking action on the network to quarantine a threat, because one of the things that we see is even if you have an endpoint agent like Microsoft Defender or CrowdStrike or Sophos or whatever endpoint agent you have, as soon as the bad guys figure out what endpoint agent you have, they do what they can to get around it. And so you need a Security Operations Center to say, oh, I see this happening. Now I need to investigate what else is happening to stop a further attack. And so they can use those endpoint agents to stop other attacks. The other thing we're providing is incident response. We never want to meet somebody at 1 a.m. on a Saturday. We will, but that's not where we want to meet you. So there are a couple of things there. Number one is as part, we can do a retainer where you're saying, hey, I want to know that if there's some giant global event, I have you all at tip of the fingers and you will respond to me, because one of the things we've seen is when there are very large global events like the Log4j incident from a couple of years ago, or, various other ones, all of the incident response companies get jammed up. You cannot get through to the 800 number, or they say, oh yeah, we'll get to you in a month. Having a retainer says, no, you know what? We have somebody, who has our back in case of a cybersecurity event. And like I said, if you don't have that, you can just call the 800 number, and and we respond around the clock. Now, I do want to open it up if folks have questions. Go ahead and put them in the chat. Now is a good time for that. If there are no questions, I will also put up my email address and Samantha's email address, and you can get to us anytime. The other thing is, at the end of every webinar we do, I give people a survey, because we want to know, how did we do? Was this helpful? Oh, and I'm going to put the survey in the chat, and then I see a question from Eric here. You mentioned that companies typically have to perform penetration tests once a year. Is that mandated for U.S. companies, and what's it based on? Is it based on size of the company or industry? It's typically, and Brad, you may know more of the regulations than I do, it's typically industry, and it's sometimes who you work with. And what do I mean by that? So for banks, it's regulated by the federal government. For it is not all U.S. companies, but it's regulated by industry. And in addition to that, if you do work with like the Department of Defense, it's part of the regulations there. Brad, what did I miss? Who else is it Who else needs to do a pen test?
In my opinion, everybody needs to do a pen test. As far as regulatory goes, if you do credit cards, if you process credit cards, for example, you need to go through pen tests and bond scans. It's really a good idea for everybody, but just like geographical location doesn't affect it. A company that I worked at in a previous life, we were a very large company, 40,000 employees, 187 locations worldwide. I was an internal auditor. All I did was fly around every day of the week and do Sarbanes and PCI audits. And so we would go to our locations in Tokyo, for example, and we would do a Sarbanes audit, even though they weren't in the U.S., because they were part of a U.S. held company. So that it can kind of trickle out across the globe. I'm not sure. I believe.
So yeah, I mean it's part of PCI DSS. So,
Yep.
it depends on what regulations your industry falls under, but it does not have to do with the size of the organization. And typically Brad and I are talking about US regulations. So if you are based outside the US and you're not doing business in the US, then what we're saying doesn't apply. Now, what Brad said in the beginning does apply, which is everybody should do a pen test because you want somebody to act like a bad guy and try to get in. But by regulation, not everybody has to. Hope that answers it. All right. Yes, it did. Eric says thank you. Therefore, I feel like I've answered it. Okay. I put the survey in the chat. We would love for folks to take the survey. We want to know how we did. Samantha, do you want to say a few words before we close out here?
Yes, we'd love to thank everyone for joining. Thank you, Jake and Brad. Really appreciate your time here today and educating all of us. And we look forward to taking the advice.
Awesome. Thanks for joining. Don't forget to take the survey on behalf of Samantha and Brad and everyone at SMB Suite and Critical Insight. Have a great day, and I hope 2024 is kicking off well for you. Bye-bye.